Justin Weaver writes as J. Warren Weaver. Welcome to the Rocky Mountain Writer Podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for jumping on, fellow West Slope Coloradan from Fruita. I'm down in Mancos, west of Durango.
Okay.
Still a good 4 hour drive away, but at least we're both west of the Colorado Divide. Yeah.
Yeah.
How are you
Yeah.
doing today?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. Yeah, it does feel a little bit like spring and got through a few snowstorms. I know it can be a lot warmer up in your neck of the woods, east of Grand Junction than down here, but yeah, it's a
Mm,
nice winter. Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, it's pretty stormy today, so I think we're getting some rain, but
yeah. Well, we've got a lot to talk about. We got a lot to talk about. I'm going to just tick off our topics. We got new. You have a short story in the brand new upcoming RMFW anthology. Just got announced that you're one of the entries in that. You've got a brand new book coming out in just a few weeks at the end of April, I believe. Solace for the Forgotten, which is the third book in your trilogy,
Mhm.
Shadow of a Spy trilogy. And then we've got an event that you're putting together in Fruita in May. And we also have lots of really cool, interesting stuff about your background and what you do every day to get into. So, looking forward to this. Let's start just a little bit with your background. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you wound up in Fruita, Colorado.
Okay. Yeah, so I grew up in Grand Junction, just down the road. I think I'm like fourth or fifth generation Grand Valley, so my family came and never left. Um, so when I was 16, I had a teacher read some of my work and kind of plant the idea of becoming an author as a career. And that kind of set me on the path to where I am now. I definitely took a roundabout kind of route to it. I ended up going to the University of Northern Colorado, where I tried to get a business degree because I thought I wanted to get into publishing. Turns out I'm not really good at business. So I ended up getting an English degree with a minor in film studies and creative writing. Graduated, realized that if I wasn't going to become a teacher, it wasn't a degree I could do much with. So I just went right back to school at the Art Institute of Colorado, where I started getting a degree in digital filmmaking and video production. I ended up landing a job in Los Angeles before I graduated, so I dropped out without getting that degree. And then I worked in many, many different facets in Los Angeles for about 6 years before my wife and I realized you can't really start a family well in Los Angeles. And she'd fallen in love with the Grand Valley thanks to my parents. So back in the Grand Valley.
Yeah, wow. So let's stick with the Hollywood stuff just for a second. What did you end up doing, and how did you work your way into what is definitely a competitive business to get into?
Yeah, so I went out on a 3 month unpaid internship with a guy that worked in talent management. When his clients were in production, he was a producer. So I got a few associate producer credits. He represented comedians, so Jim Norton, Jim Florentine, those were the big ones. So yeah, I got to work on I think a couple of Jim Norton specials. I can't really remember. And then when I wasn't working in the office job, I was just taking whatever odd jobs I could get. So I did a lot of set work. Always really enjoyed audio. So I was the sound guy for a lot of things, and then that kind of moved into editing because people were always looking for a competent editor. So I was on set talking to directors, producers, stuff like that. So I was able to get onto a few different projects, do some freelance work, and then I ended up at a post house where I started off in quality control, just making sure all the files were the right format, no mistakes inside of them. And then that became a junior editing job, then an assistant editing job, and then an editor up to lead editor. And then in the last like half year I was there, I was the department head.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So are you still editing today?
Yeah, I do. So I'm more of like a hobby videographer at this point. I work with a local real estate company that does a lot of kind of like local outreach, local businesses. It's called Locals for Locals, and so I'll just go and do these kind of like minute and a half little informational videos promoting different spots around the Grand Valley.
Wow. Are you still connected to Hollywood at all?
Yeah, yeah, I still have a ton of friends out there. Um,
Okay. But you're not doing any work, any Hollywood related work?
Not really, not anymore.
No, no, yeah. Did you work on any projects that became pretty well known?
Um, Probably nothing super major.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Did being around that whole world help with your writing fiction? And were you writing fiction all the way along?
Yeah, yeah, I was so I went out to my dream was to go to Los Angeles and be a screenwriter. So I with a co-writer developed a like 1940s period piece set in Los Angeles that revolved around the Los Angeles jazz renaissance. It was like a really kind of like formative year or formative few years in Los Angeles because we were coming out of the Great Depression, moving into World War II, and like Duke Ellington and Cab Calloway and all these huge musicians were just down in Central Avenue and what is modern day South Central, and they were just recreating jazz there. And it was a place where every race mixed, and it didn't matter who you were, what you looked like. You were down at those jazz clubs enjoying those musicians. So I ended up pitching that to Will Smith's Overbrook company. They ended up passing, but that was the closest I ever got to selling a screenplay. So that was still pretty cool.
Did you get any good feedback or
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He really enjoyed it, and I would say probably our manager at the time kind of dropped the ball because he sent an email and then sent a follow-up email immediately after. So they never got the email with our corrections to the screenplay. So it was like a month later when they actually realized it was there. And by that point, they were kind of, well, whatever. So,
yeah. But I also know that screenplays can kind of float around and linger around for a long time before somebody takes a flyer and says, this is good. I want to make it.
yeah, yeah. And I always have it in my back pocket because, I mean, we plotted out pretty much 5 seasons. We had story, that went all the way through the Zoot Suit riots and everywhere. It's a ensemble multiracial cast, so it felt like a big project because everybody was represented. So we were really, I'd love to see it be made someday.
Yeah. Wow. So you kept your hand in writing all along, whether it was screenplay or fiction. Were you starting to work on the Shadow of a Spy trilogy, or when did that come around?
So I hit a point in my editing career where I didn't think I was making the money that I should be. And I asked around to all of my friends that were in similar positions around the industry, and they were actually making less than me. So that was kind of, yeah. So that was kind of
Yeah.
the moment where me and my wife were just like, if we stay in Los Angeles, we'll never own a home, and it's like one of us is going to have to quit our job to raise kids. A job opened up in my hometown, Grand Junction, and my wife got it and was like, "All right, let's go, let's get out of here." And when I told one of my friends, he asked me, "What are you going to do in Colorado?" And I said, "I'm going to write books." And he was like, "Pitch me a book." So I pitched him the concept of To Kill a Ghost, the first book in the trilogy, and he was like, "I would read that." So so as soon as we got to Colorado, I started working on it.
What was the pitch?
um, so in screenwriting, there's like a trick. The more ironic your log line, the more interesting it is. So I said, an aging old spy yearning for his what is it? An old spy looking to relive his glory days teaches his grandson spycraft without him knowing it, only for his grandson to have to use that to solve his murder.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
good. That's good. Yeah, really good.
Yeah.
Great. All right. So you started working on, let's start talking about the trilogy. You started working on that. How long did it take you to work on the first book?
The first book was really organic. There wasn't a ton of research involved in it. I did a lot of research on the kind of the background of the grandfather, Norwegian resistance against the Nazis in World War II is just a fascinating topic for me. So I did a ton of research on that. But otherwise, the actual writing of the book, I intentionally did it anywhere, big city USA, so that when you're reading it, you can just kind of put your own experiences into the setting. So it's just really organic. And And I took a lot of inspiration from Los Angeles, Boston area, because I'd spent time in both those areas, Denver even. And so that one was easy to write. I think I wrote the first draft in about 3 months, and then sent it off to friends and family to get a read on it, and then kept picking at it, and then got an editor and learned a whole lot from the editor, and then I spent a year querying um, agents, and that was a pretty disheartening endeavor. And yeah, after a year, I was like, I'm just going to self-publish this thing, and then never looked back.
Yeah. Let's talk about the editing for a second, because here you are having been an editor, and obviously it's a little bit different
Mm-hmm.
in that sense, editing a movie, but nonetheless making changes. What did you learn from that editor? Can you kind of summarize kind of what you learned from him or her?
Yeah, so my editor is Laura Joyce. She's based in the UK. She's fantastic to work with, incredibly knowledgeable about the thriller genre. One of the biggest things I learned from her that I think really set my books up for success was just the concept of short, quick chapters. She called them potato chip chapters. So the idea of every chapter only needs to be as long as it needs to convey what you need it to, and that goes that I'm like I studied Robert McKee for a long time, brilliant guy on story, and that was his whole thing with screenwriting was you get in, you get out. Um,
Yep.
if it doesn't need to be there, if it doesn't move the story on, get rid of it, and your story is no different. So she kind of made that screenwriting concept really familiar to me in the way of like novel writing. And she also sent me the kind of like world building exercise, like because there were some characters that weren't fully realized, and she was just like, they're there because they need to be there, but you don't know why they need to be there. And I was like, okay. So yeah, just little like craft, trade stuff like that, really beneficial.
Fantastic. Did she know you had Hollywood background when she brought up the screenplay comparison?
Yeah, I think we talked about it
Yeah,
briefly.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. And how did you find her?
readsy.com.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep. And she was one of 5 editors I queried. And she was the quickest to respond, and she broke down her fees and everything in such a way that it was really like tangible. And she was like a dean of creative writing at a university in England at that time. And so yeah, it's just incredibly knowledgeable person.
yep. So, so To Kill a Ghost came out when?
February 22nd, 2022.
Okay. And how did it do? How did it feel?
It felt great. Yeah, I did a little release party at the brewery in Fruita that I work at, and I sold every single one of my books. And then I had a waiting list of about 12 people. So
That's great. Yeah,
I sold quite a few books right out the gate. Enough books right out of the gate to join the PAA. So that was pretty
there
cool.
you go. Professional Authors Alliance, for those who don't know, of Rocky Mountain fiction writers. Fantastic.
Mhm.
Excellent. Did you know going in that this was going to be a trilogy?
Yeah, I thought it was going to be a different trilogy. I thought it was
Ah,
going to be a trilogy about the grandfather, who, not to give it away, in the first book is murdered. I thought I was going to do kind of like a Pulp Fiction style storytelling where the final book was the first, and then I would jump to the beginning, tell the story of the grandfather under Nazi occupation in Norway, and then move on to his work in the intelligence field all over Europe. And people just loved the character of Eric Brown so much that I realized I just kind of needed to keep writing his story.
yeah. In the year that you were querying agents and things like that, had you already started working on the second book, or did you wait until after the first one came out?
I think I'd started to conceptualize the next book.
Hmm.
Because yeah, again, it wasn't the original trilogy I was going to write. So I was kind of going back to the drawing board on what I could do and how I could just tie kind of this world in together. So I think I was starting to do research, but it wasn't really until after I was kind of like washed my hands of the querying process that I really got started. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And tell us the title of the second book and when did it come out?
So the second book is A Killer of Spies, and that came out April 19th, 2023.
So just will be about a year between book two and book
Mm-hmm.
three.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And were there things that you found easier or harder about writing the second book and also the third in terms of just did you find your craft getting better? Did you find more of a struggle because you've got so much going on or trying to make sure it all stayed consistent with the world you'd set up?
Right.
Thanks.
Yeah. So book two, actually, I was really frustrated when I was writing that because I didn't do the research I needed to do to write it to the best of my ability. So I ended up having to do that research in the middle of the creative process, which is not something I recommend because it's every time I'd get my flow, I'd hit this point, I'd be like, well, what about this? Because that one is set in Berlin and it deals with West Berlin versus East Berlin and that type of stuff. And so it was like there was a lot more research involved with it that I hadn't really considered. Um, so it was very frustrating. I was very kind of discouraged, and it was actually that was the first year I went to the Colorado Gold Writers Conference, and that really reinvigorated me and motivated me, and I ended up writing the rest of the book in like probably 3 weeks after that, and it was
Yeah.
probably over half the book, and it just took me like 3 weeks because I was just so inspired by the people that I met at that conference.
Isn't it great? Every time I go, I just get fired up. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Um, so book two came out almost a year ago, and then book three, when did you start work on that? And tell us a little bit about how that fits in with the trilogy.
Yeah, so book three, that one takes place in Budapest, and it's kind of so I call this trilogy like the Eric Brown origin trilogy, because I do have an ongoing thriller series planned for Eric Brown, the main character, but this is kind of his going from um, like a kind of I don't know, just an uptight medical student to what he ultimately becomes, which is working in espionage and intelligence. So this trilogy is basically his story of taking these skills that his grandfather implanted in him without his knowledge and honing them and becoming something he didn't realize he was. Um, so yeah, so book three is really that he's I guess book three is where he really lets go of his naivety and takes off the rose-colored glasses and sees the world for what it is instead of his kind of like idealized reality.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So Solace for the Forgotten is the third book comes
Mhm.
out. Tell us about that title. That's a great title. Where did that come from?
I was just so whenever I come up with titles, I kind of just randomly just kind of like write down things that come to my mind. And book three deals with human trafficking. Just a little caveat there. And it's such a the victims are just such forgotten kind of victims because they're usually sold into it by family members. Um, and just kind of enslaved in a way that's really sad. And just the idea of like, trying to write a story where the pursuit is to give solace to these forgotten victims. And so I was like, oh, Solace for the Forgotten. What a great title for such a heavy subject.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. So just looking at the whole trilogy, and here you are just a few weeks away from having three books out in the world. Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. What have you learned either about marketing or just getting it out there? And can you talk a little bit about what platform you used and any kind of suggestions, or if somebody else was just looking into doing what you're doing, any kind of tips or ideas, insights you might want to pass along?
Yeah. So I did everything a little bit backwards, and it worked for me because of like I'm a bartender. We sell the books at the brewery I work at. So I am able to, every time I go to work, hand sell my books, which for me is just such a gratifying experience.
Yeah.
That's really kind of created like almost a cult following for me that I really appreciate. I did some BookBub features, and each of my first books became bestsellers in a few different markets for their category, which was also very cool.
Stop right there. And for those who don't know BookBub, and just talk a little bit about how you access that. I know there's options where you can pay for an advertising campaign, basically.
Mhm. Yeah, so with BookBub, you have to apply for like a feature deal. So I dropped my ebooks. I think my first book is 2.99. I dropped it down to 99 cents. They pushed it out in a newsletter. I spent some money on advertisement myself, and yeah, I just watched that. When that happened, I watched the rankings. I just climbed those rankings, and it was pretty surreal to see.
Insane. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And paid itself off.
Yeah, I would say because I'm also Kindle Unlimited. So I probably like I didn't pay it off probably in that actual deal, but I had Buzz on Kindle Unlimited in the UK, Canada, and Australia for almost like 7 or 8 months after that, where I was getting like
That's great.
daily reads of like a few hundred pages, 1,000 pages. So I think overall it definitely paid itself off. It was definitely a trickle to get where it needed to be, but it was worth it.
That's great. That's great. Excellent. So, and so your main platform is Amazon.
Yep,
Yep.
I'm Amazon
Yep.
exclusive.
Yep. Yep.
Yep.
Very
Um, I'm,
good.
I'm still figuring out the marketing thing, which is why I say I did things a little bit backwards. Because I really focused on just trying to get this trilogy out first. And the first book is up for Wishing Shelf Book Awards currently. So I'm a finalist in that competition. And then the second book was a Colorado Independent Publisher Association's
Sure.
Emmys gold medal winner in the thriller
That's
suspense
great.
category. So I feel like my approach was to get good content out there, get it recognized, and once the series is out, I'm going to really focus on marketing it. Um, my project right now is I'm writing my reader magnet, which for the listeners, if they don't know what a reader magnet is, it's what you give away free to people that sign up for your newsletter in exchange for them agreeing to receive your emails, basically. So my newsletter is something that I've been picking away at for a year now, and I don't really have much to show for it, but shifting gears to focus more on that side of the business.
Yeah. And is the reader magnet going to be a short story, basically, around your character?
Yeah, so it's going to be either a novella or a collection of short stories that are Eric and his grandfather, kind of their story. So it's his grandfather as actually like solving crimes because he's a restless old spy. So he's actually solving local crimes for the police without them knowing it. So he takes his grandson along with him and basically teaches him what he's doing while he's investigating all these different things and then anonymously dropping off the evidence at the police station. So,
I mean, that alone right there, just, I mean, it sounds like such a great setup for a TV series or something. Yeah,
right,
that's
right.
great. Really good. Really good. Wow. Well, again, sounds great. Really good. Where did when you saw the opportunity come along for the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers short story anthology, did you immediately say that's something I'm going to try to go for, or did you mull an idea for a while and then write something? How to talk about that a little bit?
So yeah, it was when it got announced, and when it was announced that it was going to kind of be the focus was kind of something revolving around climate change. It kind of sparked this kind of, well, what would I write that is like genre appropriate for thriller suspense? And so it kind of planted that seed of just like, well, I don't know if I could do anything, but if I could, that'd be pretty cool if I could, get it in there and join these other, great writers that are a part of it. And then it was at the time where I think it was like what Lake Mead, I think the dead bodies were turning up as it
Yep.
dried out, and I was like, oh, what a
Yeah.
great concept for a character that his evil deeds are undone by climate change. And so that was the genesis of
Nice.
the story, and then it was just sitting down and writing it, and I was kind of in between working with my editor, I want to say, um, on yeah, I can't remember. I think I was in between working with my editor on the other book, or
Yeah.
I was doing something where I had some downtime. I might have been on paternity leave at the time, so I had a lot more downtime outside of a baby. But yeah, it just kind of came together, and yeah, I just really enjoyed the concept and just had to get it out.
Had you written many short stories before that?
No.
Okay. So your first short story is being published.
Yeah.
Very cool. How'd you feel when you got contacted that you'd been accepted?
It felt really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's your, it felt like my community was saying like, we see you and you're doing good work. So,
Yeah.
because I know a lot of authors deal with imposter syndrome, and I don't know how you don't when you start to get a little bit of accolade. So it was
Totally.
nice to just be like, all right, I do belong here.
Yeah. Well, speaking of which, before we get to your event, is it felt like you're part of RMFW being in Fruita? I know there's a Grand Junction contingent that is happening, and there have been educational events in Grand Junction for years and years now. I guess they're starting to pick back up a little bit, which is great
Mhm.
to see. But do you feel like you can be part of RMFW even not living in
Um,
the Front Range?
yeah, so when I started this journey, I didn't know that there was a writing community around me. I thought I was just like the only person writing books. I really believed in that narrative. People don't read anymore. So I thought I was on
Gotcha.
this great lone wolf kind of like journey, and it wasn't until I did a random book fair in Montrose where I met Mary Hall and Ann Bolter, and they really kind of took me under their wing and they taught me so much about just like the showmanship of your author booth and just like all the resources that were out there, um, and that got me connected to RMFW and the Colorado Gold Writers Conference. And I've only been able to attend like a handful of the Western Slope events just because I have a very small child.
Yeah.
And so I don't get out a whole lot. But it's definitely something I want to get more involved in. I do see all the events that are happening on the Front Range, and it kind of, I wish I could attend them. So
Yeah.
a little bit of envy there, but I think we have a great writers community out here on the Western Slope, and yeah, I'm working to become more and more a part of it.
Yeah. For sure. When I got to move to Mancos almost 5 years ago, and we just started networking and snowballing, and now we meet monthly. We have 20 plus writers getting together every month to talk for a couple hours. It's so cool. And we get a presentation and a discussion. They're out there. You
Yeah.
shake some bushes, they're there. Yeah.
Hmm.
Great. So what prompted tell us about the event in Fruita and tell us when and what it is and how people can engage in that. And then what prompted you to start this? Or I gather it's yours.
Yeah. So yeah. Like I said, all of my books I sell behind the bar at Copper Club Brewing Company. I worked for them for I think about a year and I told them like I'm publishing a book, and they're like, oh, have an event here, and we'll put it on the bar, and you can sell it from behind the bar, and then I was just, Fruita is very tourist heavy, lots of mountain bikers, hikers, campers, stuff like that. So that when I released it in February, going to March, April, May, it was just I was selling so many books to all of these tourists that they're like, oh, they're meeting an author, they want to buy a book, they want me to sign it, stuff like that. So it was very cool, and it was very infectious to the owners, and they just decided it was like one of the coolest things having like an author working for them, and so they really have thrown their weight behind my writing career. And I was talking to them about how I wanted to give back to the community, and I was mulling over the concept of a book fair, and the owner Dan Collins was just like, "Oh, I want to do that so bad, make it happen." And and so
Wow.
yeah, they gave me full support. So it's free. You don't have to pay anything to attend, which was a big thing because I've paid for book fairs and gotten there and not even made half my money back, which is disappointing.
Yeah. 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 So an author, do you already have some authors signed up?
Yeah, RMFW's very own Terry Benson is going to be there, and Bolter. We have a few other people that are RMFW Western Slope members. We have a lady coming down from Boulder, Karen Gilliland. We'll be down there. I got contacted today. A lady is going to be visiting the Grand Valley from Denmark and wanted to have represent her son's children's book at the event. And I was like, that's amazing. That's awesome. Let's do it. So
That's great.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
I'm working with getting more local vendors, bookstores, stuff like that there too.
And what date is it and what time is it
It is
run?
May 18th, Saturday, May 18th, and it goes from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Depending on interest. If there's I'm not gonna, there's no time frame. If you're feeling like you don't need to be there anymore, you can pack up, get out. It's not a big deal. If it's a huge hit and we're getting people coming through, we'll go later. There is live music that night too, so it's an opportunity to just kind of hang out. Afterwards, they have a restaurant attached to the brewery, specializing in tacos. They're amazing, tasty beers, full bar, all that stuff. So it's a pretty fun place to hang out. Very very kid friendly.
Do you have a limit on the number of authors you can accommodate?
So it's a pretty big beer garden. There's a shaded stage that I think I can put 4 or 5 booths up on. There's another shade structure where I can easily put another, 5, 6, and then there's a covered patio. And that's all just shade outside before moving into the brewery itself. So we could accommodate quite a few. I think we talked about it'd be great to have somewhere in the ballpark of 15 to 20 booths set up there.
Yeah. And
So
is this something if it works, sounds like it might be an annual thing you'd like to do?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I just published kind of the first little bit of marketing that I've been working on. And the other owner of the brewery, Michelle Collins, immediately threw it up on the brewery page and called it the first annual.
Yeah.
So,
That's great. Wow. Fantastic. And I saw the announcement go out on the RMFW loop. So maybe in the future you could see lots of folks
hmm
piling over there. And it's such a beautiful area. If people don't know
hmm
that area between Palisade and Fruita and Grand Junction itself, downtown has
hmm
really come a long way and really, really great. Great
yeah,
book community.
there's so much to do. Like, bring the family. You can float the river. You can, go fishing on the mesa. There's so
Yeah,
many things to do with your family. It's such a beautiful area.
for sure. Wow, Justin, this has been great. What a rundown of your busy world. I mean, just looking back, thinking about the time you left LA and, pitched that book idea, um, to your friend, and he said, I'd read that book. I mean, just looking back to that moment, you must feel pretty good about how the career's come along.
Yeah, yeah. It's sometimes you gotta step away from where you want to go and see where you've come. And it's hard for me to do that from time to time because I have so much that I want to do. But yeah, looking like just closing out this trilogy, it's surreal in a way. It feels really good.
Yeah, that's awesome. And will you be at Colorado Gold, do you think, in September?
Absolutely. Hopefully, I'll
Yeah,
be teaching some courses. I've submitted some class proposals about kind of incorporating ideas of screenwriting into novel writing and making your book feel like a movie. And then dialogue is something that I feel like I excel at. So I wanted to teach a class on dialogue as well. So hopefully I'll be there teaching some classes. We'll see. I'll find out end of
yep,
next month.
yep, yep. Very good. Well, the last little bit of business here is to recommend a book or a writer, just to pass it along and pay it forward a little bit.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think so. The last book I read, and it was Red Sparrow, and I don't think he needs any help from me. I'm blanking on his name right now, Jason something or other, but fantastic book. It really gave me a different concept of how espionage works in a more modern setting. So it was incredibly educational for me and brilliantly written and a fun read.
Yep, yep, absolutely. Jason Matthews.
That's it. Yep. Yeah, and he's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
former CIA station chief, and yeah, the guy's has an incredible story.
yeah, yeah. And I will just quickly recommend, because I don't read many spy books, but I just read The Peacock and the Sparrow by I.S. Barry. And it's about a spy in Bahrain during the Arab Spring. And that is not only just a great spy novel, but I don't usually double up on recommendations on the podcast here, but I'm just so floored by that book and the execution. It's a woman writing about a man. I mean, I never doubted the male point of view in this book whatsoever. It was 100% male, and the spy stuff was easily digested by a non-spy novel guy,
Hmm.
and the twists and turns just beautifully executed, really, really well done. So
Yeah.
yeah, just I'm jumping on your recommendation with another one. So
Yeah,
what the heck?
absolutely.
Yeah, why not? Well, Justin, thank you so much, and maybe we will see you in September in Denver. I'm sort of debating running up there for May, but we'll see if I can pull that off with my wife on a 8-hour round trip and all that. So
Yeah, I mean, we'd love to have you up here. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. All right. Well, thanks a million, Justin. Good luck with the launch of Solace for the Forgotten in a few weeks.
Well, thank you very much.